Hi everybody, thanks for joining on today's episode of Creative Real Estate Ownership. I'm Josh Silverman, and today I'm at a friend and colleague's house, Brian McCarthy, who I work with and I like a lot. And he's working on a project to build out a section of his home into what's called a junior ADU. And a junior ADU is you work within the envelope of your house, you have an additional unit that you can use for family, friends, or rent it out. And we're gonna learn about the process today and talk to Brian about what's involved in the design and the cost and the benefits and the downsides and all those good things. And I'm super excited to share this with you today. So now we are in Brian's house in the space that he's gonna convert to a junior ADU. And I'm happy to be joined today by Brian McCarthy here and to have this conversation. And I really appreciate you talking to me and most importantly, talking to the folks that are interested in doing a junior ADU and learning about how you got here. I love this product. I love, as anybody who's watched this show knows that I love ADUs, and in particular I also really love junior ADUs, and I don't talk about them that much, but when Brian told me he was building one, I thought it was a great opportunity to learn more about it myself and see someone do it from the very beginning. We're here when it's just in the planning stage and nothing has happened yet beyond working with the architects and all of that term in a regular ADU. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about what a junior ADU is, and then we'll talk about why you're doing it.
Great. Yeah. So there are a few requirements for a junior ADU. The big ones being under 500 square feet and part of the initial floor plan of the house. Attached garages do count for that.
Yep.
Some of the other features or non-features are it doesn't need to have a bathroom. You can use the shared facilities of the interior of the house. This one we are doing our own bathroom floor, but that's an easy way to get in without having to do even some of the more expensive stuff. And you can get by with just a kitchenette as well.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the big requirements. Another really valuable thing for me is it allows you to still build detached full ADUs on your property. If
Right.
You start with a J8.
You can do one, right? Or can you do two more?
Gotta double check, but I believe in Pinole they allow 2 detached ADUs.
And that's one thing
city to city.
Yeah, and we're in Pinole, California. That was one thing I didn't mention. So you could potentially do 2. You could potentially essentially turn your house into a fourplex in some ways, right? If you wanted to, which is pretty amazing, right? And your lot is how many square feet?
9,000.
Yeah, so, out here in Pinole, the lots tend to be a little bigger, I guess, roughly, but 9,000 square feet is amazing. So that gives you, when I see something like that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. So you work within the envelope of the building. You can't build beyond 500 square feet. What's the square footage of this garage?
483 square feet.
Yeah, so it couldn't be better. It's absolutely perfect, right? So it's a 2-car garage and perfect for a 1-bedroom unit, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
The other thing that's interesting about junior ADUs is that you don't have to have dedicated power or dedicated meters, right? It doesn't have to have a dedicated electric meter or gas meter or water meter for that matter. So you're not changing any of the infrastructure around those things, which is a huge savings, right?
Yeah.
With an ADU in the backyard, you're gonna put all those things in, probably not gas, that's probably not allowed anymore, but you're definitely putting water and electricity in. You get to skip that. So no fees, and the capacity of the house conceivably can handle this 1-bedroom unit, right?
Exactly.
No problem, right? That's basically the assumption.
Yeah, we're gonna run it off the solar panels that we already have.
Oh, nice. Cool. So that's a huge benefit. The other thing that's required is it does have to have its own private entrance, right? And which is kind of interesting. I find that requirement a little bit interesting because they're saying you're allowed to use the bathroom or the main house conceivably, but yet it has to have its own entrance. I don't know how to square that one exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, on kind of why that might be? I like that it has to have a private entrance because I would want one myself if I was to put one in my house. So I like that, but I was like, I don't quite get that.
I guess maybe just to keep someone from cutting up their house into and not doing anything else, but just saying this is a junior ADU. Here's my main bathroom bedroom combo, and now this is a junior ADU without doing anything else.
Okay.
But that's just a guess.
Okay. It probably also encourages people to do it too. I mean, it's even if you wouldn't want to do it, if you had to do it, it's kind of for your own good in a way. You don't really, it's just really nice. So in this house, in this garage, you're gonna put a big door on this side right here, three panel slider door. So tons of light coming in from this side. And so that's a really like, nice, like for me to not have to put in new utility services into a unit, it's a game changer. I mean, it's thousands of dollars, the permitting and the trenching and all of that. So that's amazing. So private entrance under 500 square. Could you do a 2-bedroom out of this? If you wanted to, it'd be super tight, right? Like two tiny little, yeah. The other requirement for junior ADUs that's different than ADUs is you have to live in one of the units as the owner of the house. So you're gonna obviously live in the main house. Do you see that as like potentially a negative? Like let's say you want to move out of the house and then you have this unit rented, and then you want to rent your house. And you're like, oh no, I have a junior ADU. I can't move out. Have you thought about that? Has that come up in your mind at all?
I've always kind of thought like I could turn the junior ADU into kind of like after the kids are older and have moved out and maybe I want to do something else, and I could just keep this as my residence if I wanted to travel, follow them to wherever they're at in their life if they decide to leave the state.
Yeah.
And you can still rent it out on Airbnb for over 29 days.
Okay.
So as long as it's my primary residence, I could still get some income that way doing month rentals.
Nice. Yeah. So
the whole house.
Yeah. Awesome. And so that's I always go back to that every time, like with ADUs, junior ADUs, like your life changes, what your needs for your housing changes, and these like provide it for you without having to go get a new property or whatever, right? And so that's really cool. How did this come up for you in terms of why this makes sense at this point in time? And, talk to me a little bit about why you decided to do this.
Yeah, we bought right during COVID, so 2020, and it's been on my mind ever since I bought. Like I've always loved the idea of building more housing, having some extra income come in. And so initially we did have plans done, but it was going to be more of interior access used for in-laws. After spending time with my parents and my in-laws, we decided we didn't really want them living that close to us. So had the plans done, just needed to tweak them a little bit to make them more. And I just thought now is a really good time for it. It would be really nice to have a steady income coming in off your property.
Right.
And it should just about cover my mortgage.
Yeah, and the numbers you shared with me are pretty amazing in terms of kind of what this can generate for you. And I always say, I've said it a few times, but I'm like, for me, it is life-changing money because it adjusts your lifestyle in a significant way. It doesn't, you don't retire and all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm in the, but you get to work a little less or travel a little more or do something, just take a little stress off yourself, right? Yeah. And so like this is a perfect example of that. So there's, the idea of earning some bucks here, which is great. And the reality is you're not gonna have a whole lot of interaction with the tenant. I mean, if you want to, and you guys become friends or tenants, great. But in a sense, like it's kind of pretty separate, right? Yeah. And we'll walk around the property, and the way you've kind of designed it is that, I don't feel like you're gonna feel like your privacy is infringed upon by doing this.
I don't think so. And that was definitely a thought process going into this, was how do we keep it private?
Yeah.
Separate for both parties.
Right. Yeah. Totally. And I think you're going to achieve that. As far as, so thinking about you're going to go through the permitting process, which are you intimidated by it, or does it sound pretty straightforward, or what's your feeling on permitting?
In particular is really AD positive.
Yeah.
I'd say they're pushing people in that direction.
Yeah.
There is a neighbor of mine that did something similar, and they were able to, from when they submitted their permits to getting approval, was 6 days.
Six. Amazing.
Yeah.
Do they have the 60-day requirement here also? That's effective in Berkeley, and I think it might be statewide. I think the cities have to respond to you. I think this is statewide. In 60 days.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
I believe that's statewide.
Right. Yeah. But the office is moving much faster. Exactly. 6 days, which is amazing.
Their whole website specifically for JADUs and ADUs with a whole section on it to make it more streamlined.
Nice.
They're definitely
that's terrific.
Leaning into it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So property tax, I was thinking about an assessment. Like, is the city going to come out and assess this and add value to the property, and therefore are you going to be paying more property tax? Have you thought about that, or do you know anything about that?
The answer is yes. I don't think the city's going to come out, but there is a form that I fill out where I have to put what the added value will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you
Or
just
contractor.
Yeah.
In my case, I'm going to be my own builder.
Yeah,
The contractor should be ready to submit to the city in the next week or two.
great. And then hopefully 6 days, right? 6 days,
Hopefully
and
we
then
did everything right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you might get some notes back. There
Yep.
might be a little push back and forth, and that's fine. Okay, so next step here. Let's show me around and what's going to be what and where's going to be where and all those things, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. This is the whole space here. This is the 483 square feet.
You got him?
I know it looks like there's still a lot in here, but I've removed a lot of the items. Kind of the last section of thing. We got to empty out all these cabinets, and then we got to remove all those. Got to remove these shelves over here, and then that leads from this bump out all the way to the front to be the living, dining, kitchen.
Nice.
So we're gonna come and do this wall right here, and then this will be the living room, and then this will be where the big slider is.
So right across this wall here. Yep.
A lot of light, as the only other windows we're gonna have are kind of right where you as the camera is standing. So we'll have a few windows right here on the main entrance to also bring in some light. One of the big features that we want to do that's a little bit more expensive is, but we're gonna vault the ceiling in the living area to make it, because it is about 460 square feet total. It's gonna make the living space in the kitchen feel a lot bigger.
Yeah, and you already have a pitch roof, right? So you're not changing the roof line at all. It's already there. Yeah. And instead of, so this is the garage door, electronic garage door. Instead of removing this and putting a wall up, you're gonna put kind of like a fake door, so to speak.
They're called carriage style doors.
Yeah.
So they fold open like this. It's going to make building really easy.
Yeah.
Because we'll have these doors that are removable or are able to open and close. But once everything's in here and we are doing the final build, we're going to make sure that they're stationary.
Okay.
One way or another.
Okay.
We're drilling a couple holes and putting in some locks in.
And it's weatherproofed and all that good
It's
stuff.
a real garage door. It's going to look like a garage still from the outside. But
Yeah.
It's going to have windows that open and close to allow
Yeah.
some light in.
Nice.
And also allow some air in.
You're not really moving any piping, right?
No,
I mean, that's
Not
what's
really.
really
We got one gas line that's going to run over the open space. It's right up above your head right now. So that's going to have to be rerouted.
okay. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And you showed me the yard. I'd
Yeah.
love to walk over to the yard now.
This is going to be the yard space. We have this is what I'm using right now to store what's been in my garage. We will be building a fence right here, and there's a gate and a fence right behind the camera. And that is going to be leading this up as a nice private space for the tenants. We had this retaining wall built. When we first moved in, this was all dirt. There was ivy, and this was one of the first big projects, was getting rid of all that, flattening this out and making this space. So now we have a great little space for our tenants that's private and quiet.
Yeah. And pet friendly, right? So you can have a little dog out here, and like people love that. Like when I've ever rented an apartment with an area to put a pet, like it's a big deal. It's private. So the sliders, like, it's going to feel like it's an extension of their space, right? So like with those big open doors, you just feel like you're kind of inside, outside living, another huge thing. So I think it'll be popular.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah.
The one thing that we haven't touched on yet, JADUs and ADUs in Pinole, and I think most of the Bay Area, they're not allowing short-term rental.
Right.
This is going to have to be either midterm, which is 29 days or more, or long-term, which is totally fine. But I just want you to know that, like, if you're thinking like, I'm going to Airbnb this and make a ton of money, they're not really allowing that for ADUs.
Yeah. It's just really to increase housing stock and
Exactly.
to promote densification and all of those good things that I love talking about. Rent control. So rent control, obviously the ability to raise your rent past a certain point. I mean, I'm sure there's probably state rent control on junior ADUs, so that 5% mark is probably going to hit. I don't think there's additional Pinole-related rent control caps.
No, not that I've seen.
And maybe in general in Pinole, and then probably specifically for junior ADUs, probably even less restrictions in regards to rent control, right?
It's part of your house, your
Right.
floor plan.
And there's always been that carve out as far as like renting a room in your house, that those folks haven't had the same tenant protections that you do in an apartment building. So it sounds like it's going to be the same here
It-
as a
it
junior
seems
AD?
that way. You know, I haven't looked at all of it, and I'm not an attorney.
Right.
But
Yep.
everything that I have not come across anything that made me concerned that I
Right.
won't be able to.
Which is nice to have that flexibility in case there's a problematic tenant, right?
Yeah.
Or if there's somebody, you know, this is your house, your kids are here. If there's something that you're not comfortable with, it's nice to be able to have that flexibility. Be like, hey, this is not working out, and you know, rent it to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's a good thing here too. So I would assume that if there was, you know, the same restrictions of a San Francisco apartment building, people wouldn't do it.
Exactly.
You know, so like it just wouldn't make sense to be like, I'm stuck with this person forever.
Forever.
Yeah, and they're not cool.
Yeah.
Like this is not good. So that's good. Are you planning on doing kind of what's called? It's called, you know, RUBS is the term, and it's Ratio Utility Billing System. Yes, which I just learned this acronym myself. I've always known RUBS, but I never looked it up. Anyway, so that's what it means, and essentially you're basically like you're saying, okay, 20% of my gas bill goes to this unit, or whatever it is, right? And that'll probably be in your lease. I don't know if you're going to do that or if you're just going to pay for everything and just bundle it.
Ideally, to make it simple, I'm looking for one set number.
Yeah.
And just a fixed number. The number one type of tenant I'm looking for is someone that's here for like a 3 or 6 or 9 month contract. They're in healthcare or one of the refineries around here. They do a lot of that.
Yeah.
And the real value is that these companies pay a lot of the rent.
Okay.
So if you have a nice place, the tenant won't mind paying more for that space because the company's going to pay most of the rent anyway.
Nice. So
if I feel like if I bundle in the utilities and everything included,
yes,
and charge a higher amount, and then their company's going to pay for more of it anyway.
Nice. And so you're planning on renting this furnished?
Yeah, furnished midterm is at least to begin with.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. You're all set.
Just got to build it.
Just gotta build and build it yourself, no less. But yeah, it's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be really cool. I'm, you know, projecting he's gonna kind of walk away with anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 a year in profit, which is pretty amazing for, you know, the cost that some of the numbers you share with me. I'm looking at, you know, I was kind of crunching the numbers, and I'm an annual return of like almost 40%. And it's just like, okay, these are insane kind of returns. You're looking at like maybe you know, be paid back on your investment under 3 years, which is just pretty remarkable. And so hard for me to come up with a downside here. You know, I love downsides. I love risk.
I'd say
you
the
know,
biggest downside is just you're sharing your private space. Like you're okay with taking your single family home and sharing it with a tenant. Like that is really the only downside that I see. Rather than that, it's, you know, from a financial standpoint, it makes a ton of sense.
Right. And the mitigation for sharing spaces to create separate spaces, fencing and design to mitigate that. And so well done. Can I come back when you're done and we'll do a little follow up?
Yeah, come back in the middle.
Yeah.
Help me build whatever you want.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, good luck. Brian shared with me some of the numbers that he's projecting as far as the construction budget that he's working with. You know, as he mentioned, he's going to do some of the work, or a lot of the work, if not all of the work himself. And so he's looking at, you know, material costs, and I'm sure he'll hire out some folks to do something like setting the windows or something. But he shared with me it's roughly $65,000 for the project, which is quite low, but doable based on what he's saying. So for the materials and your sink and refrigerator and flooring and walls and windows, lighting, but it's relatively small space, you know, again, under 500 square feet. So if he, you know, is able to pull that off at $65K or less, he's projecting rent, you know, a fully furnished unit, short term, you know, looking at $2,500 a month or so, which would be pretty amazing. And so, you know, I take that number, and his expenses on the unit are really low since, you know, it's shared utilities and that's being billed back, and there's not a big uptick in insurance, right? So your expense ratio, normally I do like a 30% expense ratio on gross rents. You know, I'm going to cut that in half here. So it's a 15% expense ratio. So you're keeping a lot more of your rent is essentially what that means. You are going to have some maintenance, but again, it's going to be brand new. It's going to be relatively minimal. And so, you know, within a 15% expense ratio, again, you know, he's going to earn, you know, roughly, you know, 20, 25,000, depending on how often it turns over. You're going to have some downtime when it's when it's empty, but 20 to 25K a year in earnings is pretty amazing, right? And so with not too much work, if it's a 6-day permitting process, if it's maybe 2 months to build it out, something like that, depending on how fast he's working, but it's a really great investment. So I always talk about, when I see these 2-car garages, I'm like, oh, this could be a junior ADU, and I'm just really glad he's doing it. Look forward to seeing how it turns out.